All right, welcome to Spry Life. This is a new podcast, and we're going to be talking about, getting older, not just gracefully, but in a healthy way and a fit way, and maintaining your ability to live a good life for as long as you can. I'm Doug Luzader, and joined
I'm
by.
Greg King. Doug and I have known each other for a long time. We met when our wives were pregnant and developed a friendship over that period of time and have done vacations together and talked fitness and we've talked politics and we've always had ideas to get this thing going. So here we are, tester on number one.
And just by way of background, I'm a news reporter, live in DC. Graham is the one who brings some of the expertise to all of this because Graham is actually a certified trainer in any number of ways and owns a gym. And I'm the layman here, but Graham, you're the expert. And we do go on vacation. Our families do go on vacations together a lot, and we're both guys who had kids at, let's say, an advanced age. so so here we are. We were in our mid to late 40s, and learning to run around chasing our kids and so on, and kind of recognize the need to stay fit and the advantages in doing that, and just kind of the benefits that accrue for your entire life doing that. I mean, having kids keeps you young, and it also, in my mind, reinforces the necessity to really stay in as good a shape as you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, the one thing I think about this is always the ability to say yes. I mean, as a parent, when your kids say, let's go bike riding, let's go hiking, let's go fishing, let's go snowboarding or skiing, always that ability to be like, yes, I can do that. So to me, that's how I look at this is always being able to say yes to your kids when they want you to do some sort of physical activity. To me, that's a big part of advancing in your age, if you will. Like that being there when they say, let's do this, and like, oh, I can do it. Instead of, no, sorry, my knee, my back, my ankle, whatever. It's always that ability to like really say yes. That's how I look at this with kids, because they're always going to push their limits and they're young, and I'm not. That's always important to think about that.
Right. And getting back to what we're calling the podcast, and the word spry kind of comes to mind in all of this. I mean, this isn't about being jacked, or maybe it is if that's what you want, but it's about just being healthy, as Graham says, being able to say yes to things, and just being in a way in which you can just kind of jump up and do things, where you're not sedentary all the time, where you have the ability to run after a ball with your kids, that kind of thing, where you don't have to say, I'm really feeling my age today. I mean, that's a kind of limiting philosophy that we're trying to stay away from here.
Yeah, and I think where we kind of come with this is different ways. Like, my fitness and what I look at fitness and how Doug looks at it, I think are really important. Um, like, Doug, obviously you run a lot. You do your 5Ks. I always see you on Strava running 3, 5 miles. And I come this as more of a functional fitness, CrossFit trainer type thing. But we both have sort of that, that Venn diagram, that meet in the middle of like being spry, being able to do whatever you want to do physically. I think that's super important. But so we're coming at this podcast and this conversation at different ends of the spectrum. Not totally different. I mean, it's not like one of us is a smoker and one of us is a drinker, and then we're gonna see where we meet. There is a middle, there's a mindset of fitness, but just from different angles. And then one thing I preach, and one thing we'll talk about a lot of this, because living in Sarasota, I go to the beach. It's a retirement sort of place, and I always see like the oldest people in the world walking on the beach. And to me, it's always about two things, and we'll talk about this a lot, but like maintaining mobility and maintaining muscle. And those are the two things we lose when we age. Muscle at the age of 27 on doesn't get on as fast. Mobility just decreases, flexibility and mobility decrease a lot. Rarely will you see somebody who is 90, 95 and say, you could have done more cycling. You should have done more marathons. A lot of it's like, get your base level conditioning, get your base level strength, get your base level mobility and flexibility. And that's kind of what will keep you spry. And so we'll talk about those things in this podcast as we kind of dig deeper into and peel the onion about fitness and not just fitness, but I think there's also an aspect of daily life from a mindset perspective to nutrition, balancing sort of that work life part that comes in. How do you get a run in and get your kids to school and take care of your job? All those things kind of go into it. We'll talk about those things in this podcast.
Yeah, and I should add, talking about mindset. I mean, that really is, I think, what draws us together here is a similar mindset. Looking at these things, we are, and this is tough to see here in these images, but we are physically. Graham and I are very physically different people. I'm I'm like 5'9", 150 pounds, and pretty lean. Graham is much taller and a much different build than I have.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely we would play different positions on the football field, that's for sure.
How tall are you, Graham?
6'2" and a half, and currently 225. Body fat is, depending upon what scale I step on, anywhere between 17 and 21%. So
Yeah.
I like the scale at 17. I like that one better, but I'll take the 21. That's a range, right? Yeah, so I think that one thing we talked about when we kind of go through this podcast is one sort of stat came up, although Doug tried to find this stat, which was something like 1% of American men have visible abs. And I know I don't know what the number was, but what was the number that came up?
It was something like that. I mean, it was astonishingly small. The number of people whose abs you can see, and in fact, I think it even specified men over the age of 35, something like that.
Yeah.
But I did just to try to verify whether that was true, and we don't know if that's true because I started thinking how are they getting that data, and it may not be far off. It's not clear that it's an accurate figure, but regardless, I mean, it is obviously a pretty small slice of the public that has visible abs, toned abs, which requires not just being in shape, but having very low body fat because you could have really strong abs, but if it's, you're covering it up in a layer of fat, you're not going to see it.
Yeah, I mean, you can, the NFL season starts today, and there are a lot of NFL players that you will see no abs. I mean, the linemen, defensive line, some of the tight ends, those players who are clearly have extremely strong abdominal muscles, but aren't going to have any abs because they have to carry additional weight for that. So it's sometimes you can have really strong abs, but when you look at an offensive line and think, oh, he's big and out of shape, but really that's just a big guy. He needs to be big for his position, but is also super strong. So I think, and you'll see a lot when these guys retire, how they do lean down 50, 70, 90 pounds on that. Yeah. But just some stats that I know in my world, I think if the number is somewhere around 10% of Americans have gym memberships, right? So that's a super low number one. Other thing is a third of Americans are obese. A third of Americans are 10 pounds or more overweight. So you really only have, 33% of Americans who actually could show their abs, right? Because they're not overweight by 10 pounds or obese. And then there's also a malnourished part of America that's undernourished. And so that exists too. So you have this sort of, you can start slicing down, who has gym memberships, number one, who is overweight by 10 pounds or more. And then you start seeing why that number does have some relevance, whether or not it's factual or not. There is a number of men. I think the stat was something like, if there are 19 million men in New York City, and so many over 35 years old, there are only 200 men in New York City that have visible abs. I mean, it was something ridiculous like that, the number dialed it down. And in this world, in our world, one of us has visible abs. So what's your secret on that then? What do you think of this?
Well, I look at it as a combination of the two things of making sure that your abs are in shape, and then making sure that you've got the weight pared back where they kind of reveal themselves. And part of that is, well, a huge part of that is staying lean. I mean, if you get lean enough, you're gonna see your abs, and it's body shape and genetics and all that stuff too. But I will say that when I look at my weight workouts, which I do pretty religiously these days, the abs are the one thing that I work out every day. I mean, that's an everyday thing. Like I'll hit arms and chest and biceps, triceps, whatever. I'll kind of divide those up amongst workouts, but the abs I hit every single day.
Yeah.
And it's
And
not a ton of time, by the way. I mean, it's just, one or two exercises and
sure.
that's it. But it's that consistency that seems to make a big difference.
Yeah, and I could say from the viewers who are watching, Doug and I actually have drank beers together, so it's not something that he's not getting after it on a weekend and having a
Right.
couple beers at the pool or at the boat. So there is there is sort of that edge where people say, well, live and don't do any of those things. You can still have fun and still have a weekend and not necessarily be and still have the abdominal muscles, right? So
Yeah, I mean, I'm not some, vegan, only eats, super healthy meals all the time. I mean, Graham and I have thrown beers back together before. And I just, you want to be in enough shape where it goes back to Graham to what you were saying, being able to say yes to things, to have enough of a kind of a regimen that you don't have to always watch exactly what you eat. You can do the things that you want to do and still maintain a healthy weight and a healthy body.
yeah. Yeah, and that's how I always think about like just if someone offers you a cigar or a beer or a bourbon or a workout, you can always say
Yeah.
yes, not feel like, oh, I can't do this, can't do that. Life is about trying new things and experimenting with all the different parts that are out there. So that's a big thing for me is like saying yes to someone says, hey, let's get a beer. Of course, I will. Now that doesn't say Monday through Thursday, most days of the week. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I had those that happy hour life back in DC when I was younger. But for me, it's fine that it has to be a certain times.
Yeah. But, it is kind of a blessing as you get older and that happy hour life begins to, is in the rear view mirror. Um, it's tougher to keep weight off as you get older, obviously, but
Yep.
those two things actually kind of combine in a good way. You're just kind of naturally living a little healthier life. I mean, you're making your kids eat vegetables, so you're eating vegetables too. And you're not going out every night, but you want to be able to have fun on the weekends or whatever, or have a beer with dinner and not even think about it.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned, I think last time we talked about this was the importance of going to bed without drinking, if you will. Like having that day drinking was to you like a thing that you looked at much rather than like having those drinks later at night and going to bed, again, not getting good sleep, being
Right.
restless, everything else, and changing your your sleep patterns and your stress levels, everything else. So I think that's another part we look at this is like, having those drinks at, 2, 3, and
Right.
4 and not at 9, 10, and 11, which was for your life, I know getting up early for the news, at 9 o'clock, you're already in bed at that point.
Yeah, but even so, even if I had a regular schedule, I mean, even if I went to bed at, 10 or 11 o'clock at night or midnight or something like that, the idea of having a drink and going to bed or having multiple drinks and going to bed just sounds miserable to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't always the case, but now it's just not something that I really want to do.
Yeah.
But, we talk about, abs and, your fitness goals. Yeah. And that's Graham's gym behind him there. When people come in and they want to change themselves, what's the most common thing that they want?
I hear a lot and this is something we can talk about, dive larger into, but most people come with some sort of
Mm.
goal, like a goal of, I have a wedding coming up. I want to get into this dress or get into my tuxedo. Um, have all these clothes that I bought. I want to get back into those clothes. I have a $5,000 wardrobe. I need to fit back into those clothes. I want to get back on the habits of doing these things. So a lot of this is like lifestyle. A couple things goal, something lifestyle. Um, there is sort of a process that we look at when clients come to our gym. There's sort of like a goal process identity that we look at. So usually someone comes in and they're very goal oriented. I want to do this thing by that date, this by that time. And that's what we use to help, okay, keep track of those goals. It's important to get into it. And we also dive into the why. Like, why is this important for you? What makes this goal important to you? And on top of that, who else is going to either benefit or support you along this ride? So when someone comes in and saying they want to lose weight, well, do you have support at home with friends? Who's there and who will it benefit? Like If you want to lose weight, you know, maybe a wife or a husband is giving you some pressure on losing some weight, so it'll help benefit your relationship. So there's a psychological part that goes into it. But then the part of like the goal that we look at is the next step of that really is like process, right? So to us, it's like, what's that process? That means get to the gym at 6, get to work by 8, come to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that process is really important. And then eventually that person, we talk, the next step is like identity, someone who identifies as someone who does these things, right? So identify as, you know, like I know like for you, for instance, you identify as a runner. Like I know when we vacation together, I can guarantee you're going to go on a run. I know it, you know it, everyone else knows it because that's part of your identity, right? So that's going to be something that we wouldn't even ask you to do something that would jeopardize that identity because you identify as that. And that's a part where once you identify as what you are, it's much easier that everyone else sees you as that too. So kind of that goal process identity journey, if you will. So when someone comes in, the question was like, when someone comes in, they want to have usually some sort of goal. And our sort of what we want to see is when that client hits to a process client. They come in Monday,
Yeah.
Wednesday, Friday at 7, and we know that they've evolved from goal to process, right? So that's sort of that's how we look at when we have a successful client. It takes about 6 months or so to get them that step into that process. But I mean,
Right.
we hear a lot about, you know, get stronger. I don't hear in my gym a lot about um, like I want to come here for more physical attributes. They want to get stronger, maybe tone a little bit. I hear that a lot, but no one comes in saying, "Hey, you know, my body's a 6. I want my body to be a 10." And I think that's because in DC, where we are, a lot of people understand the importance of health and fitness from their mindset through their longevity purposes, maybe comparatively to like maybe, and again, I'm stereotyping here, like in LA, where it's like, hey, I've got to be on the cover of Vogue magazine in 2 months. Let's go. So I think it might be just a different mindset between like, you know, DC side versus LA side.
Right, right. No, I think that's true. I mean, different regions, and I notice when I travel for work, for instance, when I go out for a run, there are certain cities that are running cities, and certain ones that are not.
Yeah,
And it's pretty evident. I mean, you're right about making it part of your identity as someone who's healthy, because then if you don't do it one day, you just kind of, at least I kind of feel like bad, like I'm not being myself.
sure.
Like I've kind of let myself down. And I think you're right, because you do identify as someone who's healthy, someone who runs or lifts or whatever it is that you do. And that if you fall short of that, you feel like you've lost part of your identity. And the next day you really, really want to claw at it and get it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this past weekend I had a fantasy football weekend, and there was not much activity other than a little combine for the draft. So when I, you know, it took me until today. It's now Thursday, right? So it took me 3 days to get back to normal and get to the gym and everything else. So my body was aching for sure. But yeah, I mean, the identity part is that's where you want to get to eventually.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. So, what's one thing, Graham, that we should be doing maybe this next week? Something that we can incorporate into our lives or into our workouts or something to kind of notch up a little bit.
I would say if you know most people, again, another stat and I saw, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it was something like 90% of people over 21 will never sprint again,
Yeah.
right? So to me, I'd love to see, now don't go out and try to beat Usain Bolt, like, but go out and run faster, you know? So take, you know, just walk 100 steps, right? That's going to be about 300 feet-ish. And then jog back faster and just do that multiple times. If you have a heart rate monitor, see what your heart rate looks like. If you can time yourself, but just more faster sprints. When you sprint, you typically land softer on the ground than when you jog. You're on the ground for such little foot contact. So it's easier on the joints than say like a longer run. And then it just opens up your stride length will increase, right? You're going to have parts of your lungs that are now getting oxygen they haven't gotten before because you're pushing it hard. Your heart's going to act differently. So 10 sprints it should take someone 15 minutes, all said and done. The first three can be warm up. The next three can be a little faster. The last three are fastest, and your last one should just be a nice coast. And if you do that, 10 sprints, I think that'd be a great way to challenge your fitness a little bit more.
Yeah,
So
I'm really glad you brought that up because there was also a stat that I saw about the percentage of people that it was something like 95% that will never sprint after the age of 30.
yeah,
And I guess you think that's, I don't know what the actual percentage is, but that's pretty believable. I mean, how many people do
sure.
you know that really go out and sprint? And I'll tell you this, several years ago, because I've taken your advice and I've incorporated sprinting into my running routine at least once a week, usually 2 or 3 times a week. I just do some sprints, very quick wind sprints after doing a run. And I discovered several years ago, and I was a runner at the time still, but we were at a park and we had our dog with us, and our dog took off running toward a street with a busy street. And I tried to take off running after him, and my legs just didn't respond on a sprint.
Mhm.
And I was running regularly, like I had lost the ability to sprint. And it was shocking to me because at the time, I mean, I thought I was in pretty good shape, but it's one of those things that it's really easy. It's a small time commitment to work it into your week, but it's an ability that disappears very, very fast. It's probably even early. It's probably like after the age of maybe 25 or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Your hamstrings don't respond. I mean, just nothing responds for a fast sprint.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of events for this. So you don't
Yeah,
see,
right.
you see 5Ks and 10Ks and halves and 10 miles and full
Hmm.
marathons, but no one says, hey, we're doing a 100-meter sprint. Mainly because most people would blow out their hamstrings to try to finish first. And you
All
don't
right.
want that as a race coordinator to have people do it. And also the time commitment. People think, okay, well, half an hour run, 5K, it's easy to do, but to go for like a 2 mile sprint or 2 minute sprint, is why would I even do that? But look at Usain Bolt. We all know the sprinters, but how many of us can really name like the top 10K in the Olympics?
Yeah.
Right. So there is sort of a thing about, being fast is really kind of it's a cool thing, right? Going after that and being as fast as you possibly can. So that'll be our homework, and we can circle back on that in the next podcast for sure.
Okay. Very good. Well, Graham, that's all I've got. Anything else you want to get into?
Yeah, I think, well, the one thing you did say that I wanted to bring up
Yeah.
was you asked me what was the one thing people do wrong in the gym.
Yeah.
And I think there's two things. One is the most common thing in the entire world, which is the push-up. I see everyone doing push-ups, and
It's a phenomenal exercise when it's done
it's
right, right?
fantastic. I mean, push-ups are great. The one thing I see a lot of people just dropping their heads and letting like either their
Yeah.
forehead or their chin hit before their chest. And so the chest should hit the ground first and not the forehead or the chin, right? And almost think about when you're doing your push-up, almost don't even look down at the ground. Almost try to look up, right? And that'll help keep your chest lower and your head up. It won't drop your head. That's one thing. And if you can't do that, then elevate. And so instead of doing push up on the knees, they actually push up on like a higher surface, like either a chair
Or a
or
stare. Yeah.
stair or countertop. I mean, countertops are great for this at home. You can do those all day and it'll work on that full range of motion. And the core has to work differently when it's engaged from wrist all the way down to toes versus wrist to the knees when you're doing a knee push-up. So much prefer the elevated push-up than a knee push-up. That's the one thing I see most common that's done wrong. And so that's one. The second thing I see a lot of, and this is more, I see people do this, but I see box jumps a lot, and
Yeah.
I think for me, uh,
That's plyometrics, right?
yeah, jumping onto a
Yeah.
surface. Yep. And I think for that, I think it looks cool. It's great videos. But for most people, they should just do broad jumps. Just jump.
Mm.
It's a lot easier. You're not gonna hit your shin on the box. The same sort of idea of like exploding through, but like just jump forward rather than a box. Again, it looks really cool. Everyone's doing it, but just jump forward. I like that a lot better than a box jump.
Right,
So
right.
that's what I have. That's the last thing I have. So we'll see how people do on push-ups, and maybe we'll add a little push-up video to this and show you guys how to do it.
Yeah. So have I been doing push-ups wrong then? Because I do incorporate push-ups a lot. I always, just to keep myself honest, I always make sure that my chest and nose hit at the same moment.
That's fine. Yeah. Yeah, but not the nose first. What I'm saying,
right.
if your nose or your chin or your forehead hit first, but yeah, if your chest is hitting and everything else hits, that's fine.
Yeah, because you're essentially kind of doing a plank and lowering yourself down and then back up. And the other thing is that the width of your arm stance makes a big difference in terms of the muscles that you're hitting on a push-up.
Sure. Yeah. Usually the closer the hands in, the closer the chest, and the farther the hands out, the farther out. That's typically how it works. Same thing with like any kind of rowing action. When you go wide, it's the wider part of your back, and you go closer, and it's the closer part of your back.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. Yeah. Good advice. So push-ups this week, proper push-ups.
Push-ups and sprints, right?
That's right.
Keep it simple. I guess keep it spry, right?
That's right. That's right.
And,
all right. Well, we hope you found this this talk helpful, this advice helpful. Yeah, it's about living spry. It's about, being able to do the things that you want to do, even as you age, especially as you age. That's the critical part of it. And, we hope this stuff helps, that people kind of take advantage of all of this, and that you live a healthy lifestyle, one that allows you to do the things that you want to do, well into advanced age.
Absolutely.
So,
and we love feedback on this. This is our sort of test run podcast. So whatever you like, didn't like, send us some feedback, share it with people. We're going to make this a regular type thing for guys and women around the same age. I mean, we are two 50-ish year old men, but more people we can really help become more spry, the better.
Okay, fantastic. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.